Welcome to josephsmithspolygamy.org, the audio version.
Participants' reasons. The faith of the Nauvoo polygamists. A common question regarding the men and women who entered into plural marriages during Joseph Smith's lifetime is, why did they do it? Many authors have suggested that the Latter-day Saints were merely duped by a charismatic, self-proclaimed prophet. It might be argued, however, that this simplistic answer is insufficient, if not completely inaccurate. It portrays the participants as caricatures rather than real people with genuine feelings. In addition, it fails to take into account the records left by the participants that describe their experiences and their reasons for embracing the practice. Many related their own divine manifestations, validating in their hearts that the practice was correct. Others shared their convictions that Joseph Smith was a true prophet, so his teachings should be heeded. Evidence indicates Nauvoo polygamists would not have been easily duped. Despite the authors who depict Nauvoo polygamists as dupes, the reality is that most of them were just as skeptical and discerning regarding the institution of the practice as observers today. Non-Mormon Bernard DeVoto observed in 1930, Joseph Smith attracted to his support not only the ordinary fanatics who gave the American Pentecost its hundreds of sects and supported them all, but also such superior and more significant men as Sidney Rigdon, Orson Pratt, Parley Pratt, Orson Hyde, W. W. Phelps, and Brigham Young. Wilhelm Weil, who had little good to say about Joseph, noted that Joseph Smith was shrewd enough to have a few honest men around him whom he placed in responsible positions, who filled them with fidelity and self-sacrifice. Accordingly, to assume that Joseph Smith could have behaved as the womanizer or hypocrite, as depicted by numerous writers, without disillusioning followers like Heber C. Kimball, John Taylor, Eliza R. Snow, Zina Huntington, and many others seems less likely. It appears that a majority of Joseph's closest followers were too perceptive to be fooled and too religious to become accomplices in a deliberate deception. The accounts below come from the Nauvoo polygamists themselves. They are all later recollections, so they suffer from the weaknesses and biases typical of such narratives. Nevertheless, readers are left to judge the sincerity and motives of these individuals for themselves. Revulsion was almost the universal reaction to plural marriage. Polygamy historian Lawrence Foster acknowledged that the nearly universal reaction to plural marriage teachings in Nauvoo was revulsion. In almost all recorded cases, initial presentation of the belief in plural marriage to either men or women produced shock, horror, disbelief, or general emotional confusion. Those who eventually accepted the principle almost invariably went through a period of inner turmoil lasting from several days to several months. LDS historian Catherine M. Daines observed that in every recorded case, the initial attitude towards entering plural marriage was negative. Brigham Young related his feelings upon learning of plural marriage. "My brethren know what my feelings were at the time Joseph revealed the doctrine. I was not desirous of shrinking from any duty, nor of failing in the least to do as I was commanded. But it was the first time in my life that I had desired the grave, and I could hardly get over it for a long time. And when I saw a funeral, I felt to envy the corpse its situation, and to regret that I was not in the coffin." Apostle John Taylor recalled, "At the time when men were commanded to take more wives, it made us all pull pretty long faces sometimes. It was not so easy as one might think. When it was revealed to us, it looked like the last end of Mormonism. For a man to ask another woman to marry him required more self-confidence than we had." In a discourse delivered on the 10th anniversary of the martyrdom, he also declared, "I remember being with President Young and Kimball, and I think one or two others with Brother Joseph, soon after we had returned from England. He talked with us on these principles and laid them before us. It tried our minds and feelings. We saw it was something going to be heavy upon us. It was not that very nice, pleasing thing some people thought about it. It is something that harried up our feelings. Did we believe it? Yes, we did. I did. The whole rest of the brethren did, but still we should not have been glad to push it off a little further. We would have been glad if it had not come in our day, but that somebody else had something to do with it instead of us. The reaction to the commandment among LDS women was similar to Emma Smith's great dislike. Or worse, Bathsheba B. Smith remembered, "We discussed it," polygamy, that is, us young girls did, for I was a young girl then, and we talked a good deal about it, and some of us did not like it much. Recalling an even stronger aversion, Mary Isabella Hales Horn said, "The brethren and sisters were so averse to polygamy that it could hardly be mentioned." Eliza R. Snow remembered that the subject was very repugnant to my feelings. Lucy Walker, one of Joseph's plural wives, recorded, "My astonishment knew no bounds. This announcement was indeed a thunderbolt to me. Every feeling of my soul revolted against it." Mercy Rachel Fielding, plural wife of Hiram Smith, wrote her feelings, saying, "This subject, when first communicated to me, tried me to the very core. All my former traditions and every natural feeling of my heart rose in opposition to this principle." Jane Snyder Richards, who was married to Apostle Franklin D. Richards, recalled her more moderate response. She thought it was a strange thing and was uncertain as to the result, but was satisfied that it was a sacred revelation and that her religion required its acceptance. Faith in Joseph Smith as a prophet. All Nauvoo polygamists possess faith that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. This conviction alone was sufficient for many to embrace plural marriage once he taught them of the principle. Benjamin F. Johnson wrote of his 1843 introduction to plural marriage by the prophet. "President Smith took me by the arm for a walk, leading the way to a secluded spot within an adjacent grove, where, to my great surprise, he commenced to open up to me the principle of plural or celestial marriage. I sincerely believed him to be a prophet of God, and I loved him as such." In another account, Benjamin F. Johnson wrote, "Joseph Smith led me the way into a by-place in the edge of the woods surrounded by tall brush and trees. Here, as we sat down upon a log, he began to tell me that the Lord had revealed to him that plural or patriarchal marriage was according to his law, and that the Lord had not only revealed it to him, but had commanded him to obey it, that he was required to take other wives. If a thunderbolt had fallen at my feet, I could hardly have been more shocked or amazed. He saw the struggle in my mind and went on to explain. But the shock was too great for me to comprehend anything, and in almost an agony of feeling I looked him squarely in the eye and said, while my heart gushed up before me, 'Brother Joseph, this is all new to me. It may all be true, you know, but I do not. To my education it is all wrong, but I am going, with the help of the Lord, to do just what you say.'" Warren Foote related George A. Smith's struggle in accepting the revelation. George A. Smith related to us what a trial it was to him to receive the revelation on plural marriage. It was first made known to him by the prophet Joseph. He did not feel at first as though he could receive it as from the Lord. But again, he knew that Joseph was a prophet of God, and he durst not reject it. Thus, he reasoned with himself until he obtained a testimony from the Lord for himself. Joseph Smith cautiously explained the teachings of plural marriage to listeners who believed he was a prophet and whom the prophet thought would accept the practice. Joseph Smith's plural wives reported spiritual experiences. Several of the prophet's plural wives left accounts of their experiences. Joseph B. Noble recalled concerning Louisa Beeman, Joseph Smith's first plural wife in Nauvoo, "She was a woman of irreproachable morality, who entered into the plural marriage relation on a deep-seated conviction that the doctrine was from God." Zina Huntington related, When I heard that God had revealed the law of celestial marriage, that we could have the privilege of associating in family relationships in the worlds to come, I searched the Scriptures, and by humble prayer to my Heavenly Father, I obtained a testimony for Himself that God had required that order to be established in the church. She also recalled, plural marriage was something too sacred to be talked about. It was more to me than life or death. I never breathed it for years. I will tell you the facts. I had dreams, and I am no dreamer, but I had dreams that I could not account for. I know this is the work of the Lord. It was revealed to me even when young. Things were presented to my mind that I could not account for. When Joseph Smith revealed this order, I knew what it meant. The Lord was preparing my mind to receive it. In another reminiscence, she declared, I received a testimony for myself from the Lord of this work, and that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God before I ever saw him. While I resided in the state of New York, given in answer to prayer. I knew him in this lifetime, and I know him to have been a great, true man and a servant of God. Presendia's biographer, Emmeline Wells, wrote in the Woman's Exponent, Sister Presendia became more familiarly associated with the prophet and his teachings. Joseph himself taught the principle of plural marriage to Sister Presendia, and her heart was humble, and her mind open to receive the revelations of heaven. She knew Joseph to be a man of God, and she had received many manifestations in proof of this, and consequently, when he explained to her clearly the knowledge which he had obtained from the Lord, she accepted the sealing ordinances with Joseph as a sacred and holy confirmation. Emily Partridge related, I had thought a great deal about plural marriage in the time from 1842 to 1843, and I had prayed for it to know what it was, and if it was my duty. I thought I ought to have listened to it from Joseph, for I was greatly troubled over it, as I feared I had done wrong in not listening to it. And so I prayed to be enlightened in regard to what I should have done. Well, in time, I became convinced that there was nothing wrong about it. Eliza Partridge also wrote, Joseph Smith taught us, Eliza and her sister Emily, the plan of celestial marriage and asked us to enter into that order with him. This was truly a great trial for me, but I had the most implicit confidence in him as a prophet of the Lord. Eliza R. Snow left this account. In Nauvoo, I first understood that the practice of plurality of wives was to be introduced into the church. The subject was very repugnant to my feelings, so directly was it in opposition to my educated prepossessions, that it seemed as though all the prejudices of my ancestors for generations past congregated around me. But when I reflected that I was living in the dispensation of the fullness of times, embracing all other dispensations, surely plural marriage must necessarily be included, and I consoled myself with the idea that it was far in the distance and beyond the period of my mortal existence. It was not long, however, after I received the first intimation, before the announcement reached me that the set time had come, that God had commanded his servants to establish the order by taking additional wives. I knew that God was speaking. As I increased in knowledge concerning the principle and design of plural marriage, I grew in love with it. I was sealed to the prophet Joseph Smith for time and eternity in accordance with the celestial law of marriage, which God had revealed, the ceremony being performed by a servant of the Most High, authorized to officiate in sacred ordinances. This, one of the most important circumstances of my life, I have never cause to regret. Almira Johnson experienced something unique in several ways. I also lived a portion of the time at Brother Joseph Smith's in Nauvoo, when many conversations passed between him and myself on this subject of plural marriage. On a certain occasion, in the spring of 1843, the exact date of which I do not now recollect, I went from Macedonia to Nauvoo to visit another of my sisters, the one who was the widow of Lyman R. Sherman, at which time I was sealed to the prophet Joseph Smith. At the time, this took place by Hiram Smith, Joseph's brother, who came to me and said, I need not be afraid. I had been fearing and doubting about the principle, and so had he. But he now knew it was true. After this time, I lived with the prophet Joseph Smith as his wife, and he visited me at the home of my brother Benjamin F. Johnson at Macedonia. Helen Mar Kimball left these reminiscences. The next day, the prophet called at our house, and I sat with my father and mother and heard him teach the principle and explain it more fully, and I believed it. But I had no proofs, only his and my father's testimony. I thought that sufficient and did not deem it necessary to seek any further. But had I been differently situated like many were without a father and a mother to love and counsel me, probably my dependence, like theirs, would have been on the Lord. But I did not lean upon his arm. My father was my teacher and revelator, and I saw no necessity then for further testimony. But in the years after, the Lord, in his far-seeing and infinite mercy, suffered me to pass through the rough waves of experience, and in sorrow and affliction, I learned that most important lesson, that in him alone I must trust, and not in weak and sinful man, and that it was absolutely necessary for each one to obtain a living witness and testimony for him or herself, and not for another, to the truth of this latter-day work. She also recorded, My father taught me, the first time that I had ever heard of it, as a saving, pure, and holy principle. I afterwards, at my father's house, with him and my mother, listened to the prophet teach it. I believed that it was right, but did not know it until a few years after I passed through the most intense suffering. It is true that my body was prostrated by sickness, but my spirit and my understanding was quickened, and I was shown the workings of the devil and his agents and his angels. The principles of celestial marriage were also shown to me. I knew that it was from God. The vision of my mind was open to see and understand the will and design of Almighty. I had a view of the order of plural marriage. The beauty and the glory which I saw in it was enough to make up for the trials in this life. Some of the stories contain angelic visitations. For example, Desdemona Fulmer reported a night vision in which an angel told her that the polygamy doctrine was true. Also, in a 1902 signed statement, Mary Elizabeth Rollins reported, In 1834, Joseph was commanded to take me for a wife. I was 1,000 miles from him. He got afraid. The angel came to him 3 times, the last time with a drawn sword, and threatened his life. I did not believe. If God told him so, why did he not come and tell me? The angel told him I should have a witness. An angel came to me. It went through me like lightning. I was afraid. Joseph said he came with more revelation and knowledge than Joseph ever dare reveal. Joseph said I was his before I came here, and he said all of the devils in hell should never get me from him. In another narrative, she gave additional details. I made it the subject of prayer, and I worried about it because I did not dare speak to a living being except Brigham Young. I went out and got between 3 haystacks, where no one could see me. As I knelt down, I thought, why not pray as Moses did? He prayed with his hands raised. When his hands were raised, Israel was victorious, but when they were not raised, the Philistines were victorious. I lifted my hands, and I have heard Joseph say the angels covered their faces. I knelt down, and if ever a poor mortal prayed, I did. A few nights after the angel of the Lord came to me, and if ever a thrill went through a mortal, it went through me. I gazed upon the clothes and figure, but the eyes were like lightning. They pierced me from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet. I was frightened almost to death for a moment. I tried to waken my aunt, but I could not. The angel leaned over me, and the light was very great, although it was night. When my aunt woke up, she said she had seen a figure in white robes pass from our bed to my mother's bed and pass out the window. Joseph came up the next Sabbath. He said, Have you had a witness yet? No, said I. I have not had a witness, but I have seen something I have never seen before. I saw an angel, and I was frightened almost to death. I did not speak. He studied a while and put his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. He looked up and said, How could you have been such a coward? Said I was weak. Did you think to say, Father, help me? No. Well, if you had just said that, your mouth would have been open, for that was an angel of the living God. He came to you with more knowledge, intelligence, and light than I have ever dared to reveal. I said, if that was an angel of light, why did he not speak to me? You covered your face, and for this reason the angel was insulted. Said I, will it ever come again? He thought for a moment and then said, no, not the same one, but if you are faithful, you shall see greater things than that. Lucy Walker shared her story several times. In the year 1842, President Joseph Smith sought an interview with me and said, I have a message for you. I have been commanded of God to take another wife, and you are the woman. My astonishment knew no bounds. This announcement was indeed a thunderbolt to me. He asked me if I believed him to be a prophet of God. Most assuredly I do, I replied. He fully explained to me the principle of plural or celestial marriage. He said this principle was again to be restored for the benefit of the human family, that it would prove an everlasting blessing to my Father's house and form a chain that could never be broken, worlds without end. What have you to say? He asked. Nothing. How could I speak, or what could I say? He said, if you will pray sincerely for light and understanding in relation thereto, you shall receive a testimony of the correctness of this principle. I thought I prayed sincerely, but was so unwilling to consider the matter favorably that I fear I did not ask in faith for light. Gross darkness instead of light took possession of my mind. I was tempted and tortured beyond endurance until life was not desirable. Oh, that the grave would kindly receive me, that I might rest on the bosom of my dear mother. Why should I be chosen from among thy daughters, Father? I am only a child in years and experience, no mother to counsel, no father near to tell me what to do in this trying hour. Oh, let this bitter cup pass, and thus I prayed in the agony of my soul. The prophet discerned my sorrow. He saw how unhappy I was, and sought an opportunity of again speaking to me on the subject, and said, although I cannot, under existing circumstances, acknowledge you as my wife, the time is near when we will go to the Rocky Mountains, and then you will be acknowledged and honored as my wife. He also said, this principle will yet be believed and practiced by the righteous. I have no flattering words to offer. It is a command of God to you. I will give you until tomorrow to decide the matter. If you reject this message, the gate will be closed forever against you. This arose every drop of scotch in my veins. For a few moments I stood fearless before him and looked him in the eye. I felt at this moment that I was called to place myself upon the altar a living sacrifice, perhaps to brook the world in disgrace and incur the displeasure and contempt of my youthful companions. All my dreams of happiness blown to the four winds. This was too much, for as yet no shadow had crossed my path aside from the death of my dear mother. The future to me had been one bright, cloudless day. I had been speechless, but at last I found utterance, and I said, although you are a prophet of God, you could not induce me to take this step of so great importance unless I knew that God approved my course. I would rather die. I have tried to pray, but received no comfort, no light, and I emphatically forbade him from speaking again to me on this subject. Every feeling in my soul revolted against it, said I. The same God who has sent this message is the being I have worshipped from my early childhood, and he must manifest his will to me. He walked across the room, returned, and stood before me with the most beautiful expression of countenance, and said, God Almighty bless you. You shall have a manifestation of the will of God concerning you, a testimony that you can never deny. I will tell you what it shall be. It shall be that joy and peace that you never knew. Oh, how earnestly I prayed for those words to be fulfilled. It was near dawn after another sleepless night when my room was lighted up by a heavenly influence. To me, it was in comparison like the brilliant sun bursting through the darkest cloud. The words of the prophet were indeed fulfilled. my soul was filled with the calm, sweet peace that I never knew. Supreme happiness took possession of me, and I received a powerful and irresistible testimony of the truth of the plural marriage, which has been like an anchor to the soul through all the trials of my life. I felt that I must go out into the morning air and give vent to the joy and gratitude that filled my soul. As I descended the stairs, President Smith opened the door below, took me by the hand, and said, "Thank God you have a testimony. I too have prayed." He led me to a chair, placed his hands upon my head, and blessed me with every blessing my heart could possibly desire. The first day of May 1843, I consented to become the prophet's wife and was sealed to him for time and eternity at his own house by Elder William Clayton. A second-hand account includes an angelic visitation. I went to live with Joseph Smith's family as a maid, and after I had grown up, Joseph asked me if I would marry him. I felt highly insulted, and he said if I wanted to know whether the principle was true, I could go to God and find out. One night after supper, I went out into the orchard, and I kneeled down and prayed to God for information. After praying, I arose and walked around the orchard and kneeled again and repeated this during the night. Finally, as I was praying the last time, an angel of the Lord appeared to me and told me that the principle was of God and was for me to accept it. Other Nauvoo polygamists reported their own spiritual experiences. Below are additional accounts from Nauvoo polygamists regarding their conversions to the correctness of the principle. Lorenzo Snow remembered, "There is one singular feature in it relating to plural marriage. In regard to that doctrine, allow me first to say I have a knowledge of it as a principle revealed from God, belonging to the religion we have espoused. I was personally acquainted with Joseph Smith the prophet during 12 or 14 years, by whom I was first taught this doctrine, and knew him to be a man of truth and of honor. But then, I am not dependent on his word for my knowledge of plural marriage. The Lord gave me a divine testimony confirming his teachings, which no man can give or take away." The late Kimball's daughter Helen described her parents' conversion. "My father's heart was raised at a time in supplication, and while pleading as one would plead for life, the vision of her mind was opened, and as darkness fleeth from before the morning sun, so did her sorrow and the groveling things of the earth vanish away, and before her she saw the principle of celestial marriage illustrated in all its beauty and glory, together with the great exaltation and honor it would confer upon her in that immortal and celestial sphere, if she would but accept it and stand in her place by her husband's side. She was also shown the woman he had taken to wife, and contemplated with joy the vast and boundless love and union which this order would bring about, as well as the increase of kingdoms, power, and glory extending throughout the eternities, worlds without end. Her soul was satisfied and filled with the Spirit of God, with a countenance beaming with joy. She returned to my father, saying, 'Heber, what you have kept from me the Lord has shown to me.' She related this scene to me and to many others, and told me she never saw so happy a man as father was. When she described the vision and told him she was satisfied and knew that it was from God." Elizabeth Whitney recalled her experience with her husband, Bishop Newell K. Whitney. "Joseph had the most implicit confidence in my husband's uprightness and integrity of character, and so he confided in him the principles set forth in that revelation, and also gave him the privilege of reading and making a copy of it, believing it was perfectly safe with him. My husband revealed these things to me. We had always been united and had the utmost faith and confidence in each other. We pondered upon the matter continually, and our prayers were unceasing that the Lord would grant us some special manifestation concerning this new and strange doctrine. The Lord was very merciful to us. He revealed unto us his power and glory. We were seemingly wrapped in a heavenly vision. A halo of light encircled us, and we were convinced in our own bosoms that God heard and approved our prayers and intercedings before him. Our hearts were comforted, and our faith made so perfect that we were willing to give our eldest daughter, then 17 years of age, to Joseph in the order of plural marriage. Laying aside all our traditions and former notions in regard to marriage, we gave her with our mutual consent." Some church leaders reported premonitions of the unveiling of plural marriage. Brigham Young received special reflections that were upon his mind while in England, but this was not until after he had told Joseph Smith what he understood. Lorenzo Snow recalled, "It was revealed to me before the prophet Joseph Smith explained it to me. I had been on a mission to England between 2 and 3 years, and before I left England, I was perfectly satisfied in regard to something connected with plural marriage." Nauvoo High Counselor James Allred remembered that he did not believe it at first. It was so contrary to his feelings, but he said he knew Joseph was a prophet of God, so he made a covenant that he would not eat, drink, or sleep until he knew for himself that he had got a testimony that it was true, that he had even heard the voice of God concerning it. Another counselor, Thomas Grover, recalled a vision of a future plural wife. "On a sudden there stood before me my oldest wife, that I have now, and the voice of the Lord said that this is your companion for time and all eternity." Church member Martha Jane Knowlton Correa had a peculiar dream that convinced her of the propriety of plural marriage. Samuel Amos Woolley, another Latter-day Saint, recounted his own dream vision verifying the validity of plural marriage. Phoebe W. Woodruff, Apostle Wilford Woodruff's first wife, penned this account. "When the principle of polygamy was first taught, I thought it the most wicked thing I had ever heard of. Consequently, I supposed it to the best of my ability until I became sick and wretched. As soon, however, as I became convinced it originated as a revelation from God through Joseph, and knowing him to be a prophet, I wrestled with my Heavenly Father in fervent prayers to be guided aright at that all-important moment of my life. The answer came. Peace was given to my mind. I knew it was the will of God, and from that time to the present I have sought to faithfully honor the patriarchal law. Of Joseph, my testimony is that he was one of the greatest prophets the Lord ever called, that he lived for the redemption of mankind and died a martyr for the truth." Another narrative of an unnamed couple in Nauvoo states, "We each began having revelations from heaven night after night, saying that we must go back to the customs of the patriarchs with regard to marriage. The whole thing was so repugnant to us both that for some time we could not receive it. The revelations, however, became clearer and more emphatic, and at last my wife ventured to communicate to me what the Lord had declared to her. This led to a comparison of experiences all around, and we found the same revelation had come to many, and hence it was received and acted upon as the unmistakable will of heaven." An additional record involves a woman named Sarah Studemont Levitt. "My mind was carried away from the earth, and I had a view of the order of the celestial kingdom. I saw that plural marriage was the order there, and oh, how beautiful! I was filled with love and joy that was unspeakable. I walked with my husband and told him of the views I had, and that the ordinance was from the Lord, but it would damn thousands. It was too sacred for fools to handle, for they would use it to gratify their lustful desires." Howard Correa related that his wife had a dream in which Brother Thompson sealed her, and she told part of the dream to Hiram Smith, but felt a delicacy telling him it all, and that Hiram Smith then explained to Correa and his wife the entire revelation authorizing polygamy, received but a few days before. He described the experience. "Martha Jane Knowlton Correa had a peculiar dream. She desired me to accompany her to Brother Hiram Smith's for the purpose of getting him to interpret it. We went the next Sunday to see him, but having company, he was not at liberty to say much. The next Sunday we went, but found as many at his house as the Sunday previous. He said to us, 'Come again the next Sunday.' But in a day or so he called at our house and invited us to take a ride with him in his buggy. He commenced rehearsing the revelation on eternal marriage. This was on the 22nd of July, 1843. The dream was in harmony with the revelation. While still in the buggy, Brother Hiram asked my wife if she was willing to be sealed to me. After a moment's thought, she answered yes. He then asked me if I wished to be sealed. I replied in the affirmation. He performed the sealing then and there." Summary: this review of the accounts from Nauvoo polygamists indicate that they seemed sincere and probably would not have been easily duped. Their nearly universal reaction to polygamy was revulsion. Some accepted the principle based on their faith alone in Joseph Smith as a true prophet of God. Most, however, reported that they petitioned the heavens directly to receive their own assurance that participation was according to his divine will. It seems that without this extra-worldly contribution, most Nauvoo polygamists would not have acquiesced to the commandment to practice it. To learn more about some of these Nauvoo polygamists, check out Joseph Smith's Polygamy Toward a Better Understanding.